Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's class. We're in our 11th week of this training. And today we'll be looking further into what we handled last week, which is NextJs. So for today, we'll be digging deep a little to see how we can create our own API routes within our Next.js project and utilize it and do basic code functionalities, right? Utilize using our own custom API files, routes, right? Oh, that's fine enough. You can always text. You can always text if there's need. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and start our class. So last week we stopped at having our users or having our user information from JSON placeholder dummy API, right? And we're able to create a card for view more, and we could route using our IDs dynamically to route to those pages where we had the details for each user, right? Then we also had our contact us page and our about us page, and we also saw how the routing works. Okay, so basically what we're just going to be modifying what we have already, right? So we don't have to write too much of code. So first thing we'll do is to create our routes. So the first step is to create a folder called API, right? Since we're using the app, routing structure, we call our API, and then we create another folder within this API and call it our user folder. Call it users, right? So you see what we did with the pages, right? And we had folders that had the pages in them, and we had page.jsx. These are like conventional stuff, right? So for us to handle API, there's also a convention we are going to follow, which will be to call every file we create here a route, right? Because that is how Next.js will recognize the route. Okay, so for our route to display all users, we are going to create a new file and call it routes.js, right? Then for our route to display our users by ID, we are going to say ID. We create a folder of ID, and then within this folder, we create a route.js. Are you following? So this route.js is the route where we are going to be initiating our endpoint for calling the general user object, right? And then for route, we want to use this id.route to call each user by their ID. I know that the class is small today, but I still want us to interact. So try to respond in the text box, okay, if you are following. So are you following? Do you understand what I just did now? Udo.
Hello, sir. You know, I missed the last class, so I'm just looking at what you're doing. So when I look at the video again, I will understand more.
Okay. Okay. What's your own excuse for not following the class? I'm getting it, sir. Okay. All right. Okay, let's go. So now that we have our routes created, right, we want to now create our API endpoints, right? We want to create our dummy endpoints, or it's not actually a dummy endpoint, even though we are not connecting to any database at the moment, but it's not actually a dummy endpoint, right? So before we continue, let's create a data set that we'll be using for this practice, right? Okay, so for this, we are going to create a folder inside app.js and call it data, okay? And then within the data folder, we are going to create a file called users.js. And within this, we are going to define our data. So let's say export, let users equals to an array of objects. I want to have ID of 1. I want to have name, 0, yeah, mhm, okay, mhm, okay. Let's say we want to have a couple other users, right? So we can duplicate this, maybe this can be Enoch. Okay. So, all right. So we have everybody in class in this hour, and we can just say, your Okay, this is what we'll be working with in this class. All right, let's keep going. So now that we have users here and we've exported this model of data, we can now come back to our route, our main route, and start writing out our code. So for this, we want to import first, import our user data. Okay. We want to import our user data. Then we want to also import next request from next server and next response. Okay. All right. With this now, we don't want to update that user array directly. So we want to create a local version of that user array. So the local users equals to users. I'm sure we understand what this does already. So we don't need to waste time there. So we'll start with our export. Async function get. All right. Then we now return our next response .json. Local user. I want to say the status should be equals to 200. Are you serious?
I'm always serious.
Siri, I didn't ask you. Okay, where is it? Oh, it's old. It's not that much of a model. I can't see. Okay, all right. Is it good now? It's good now, yeah? Apologies, my bad. All right, so this we just created a simple get endpoint, a simple get route, a get request, right? That is supposed to get all these users in this array. Also, if we call from the client side, if we call this route and use the get function, the get method, we should activate this particular endpoint to get the users for us, right? And display it on the DOM. So this is not really complicated. This here is a hook that comes with NextJs, next server. It's a next server property. So all we're using is to collect the response, and it helps us collect the response, and then we can now convert it using JSON. We can now convert it to JSON, and we can display and also get our status, right? So we'll do the same thing for creating. So for creating, we are going to be using a post method. So we'll say post, and then for this post method, we want to add the request. And then for that, we want to say const body should be equals to await request dot JSON. Then we want to say const new user equals to ID. So we want to give the new user a unique ID using the date.noun function. And then we want to add it to the body. Are we together? Are we together? Am I the only one in this class? Are we together? All right, good. So we can now say update local user. So remember that we are using a local version of our user array, right? So we say update local user, and for local user we want to push new user. Are we good? All right. So we can now return next request dot JSON, and then we want to pass the new user. And for that new user, for that we want to say status 201. Okay. All right. So with this, right, we can now come to our user slice. Can now come to our user slice and change our route. So before now, we're using JSON placeholder. So now I'm going to change our route. And our route will now be slash users. Okay. Are we following? So now for this slash users to work, we need to define our base URL. Or let's say, yeah, let's call it the base URL. So what I'll do is to create I'll create a custom Anxious instance, and then I'll call it Anxious instance JS. Now for this, I'm just going to import our Axios from Axios, and then I would const Axios instance equals to Axios dot create base URL /API. So what I'm now saying for the base URL, I want this /API, this route, this one, where our API routes are housed. Yeah, so exactly. So I want where we are housing our API routes, I want it to be my base URL, right? So this would be my base URL for now, for this application, right? And then I can now export default Axios instance. All right. So with this now, I can come to user slice and import Axios instance. All right. So we are good to go. So now that we have our API-based URL, anything we add here is going to be like a suffix after API, after /API. So what our route will now look like is localhost 300 /API/users, right? That will be our API. This is our new API route that we just created for users, which should display the users that we have in this data file on the DOM. In this file, should display these users on the DOM. So if we go ahead and visualize this, good. All right, so we have one encounter 2 children. Okay. Okay. So good. So we now have our API call done, right? We can see all the names that we have in our data there: John, Enoch, Udo, and Henry, right? Acknowledge if we are following. All right. So now we can now go ahead to create our routes for getting users based on their IDs, right? Okay. So go ahead and create our routes. Is it interesting so far? Okay. Okay, so Axios is that the thing is that Axios already Axios already defines your base URL, right? But best practice requires that you define a base URL, because let's assume that you are utilizing an actual backend, right? The backend, you will be provided with a base URL. Now, creating this Axios instance is like having your own version of Axios, right? Extending Axios. Let me use extending Axios, right? So it's like extending Axios, right? So you are like defining that this is the API URL, that this is the base URL that I want to utilize for all my Axios calls. Are you following? Now, typically, you are supposed to like have a .env file, an environment variable file, but for now, we are not in that phase of things. That's like high level. So like I said, this class is going to basically is going to be the basics. Yeah. So yeah, this works. This is like a very good way to handle your API calls, right? Like defining your base URL. So all you are doing here is you are initiating an Ansios instance and then defining your base URL. So whatever is going to happen in your API call now will utilize that base URL as far as you're attaching this Ansios instance to it. Are we together? Are we good? All right. So if we go to our, so let's do the same thing. Let's go ahead and handle our GET requests for users based on their IDs, right? So we also import the user array, users from right. Then we also want to import next request and next response. All right, so let's create our local users again, right? And then, all right, and then we can now go ahead and write out our function. All right, so for this, we have request, and then we can now go ahead and say try const URL equals to new URL request dot URL. And const user ID and now be equals to URL dot path name plus plates. Okay. So I believe you understand what I just did here. I just picked out the user ID from the path name, from the URL. Okay, all right. So const user will now be equals to local user dot find, right? Because we want to display just one user, right? So you can say u dot ID. So this u here is user, right? So I'm just picking the user dot ID. Okay. And then I want to check it. I want to check it on the ID that is available. Okay. All right, so let's go on. And then I'll say if user does not exist, right? I want to return next response to JSON and say error user not found. Okay. Then I want to give it a status of 404. Okay. I'll give it the status of 404. All right. Then in the case where it doesn't, where it exists, we want to return next response as not next response as okay. So we want to user, then we want to give it status of 200. Okay. All right, that should work. Okay. So with this now, we can now add our catch, right? Remember, we're using a try catch block, right? So now say catch. Error. And then we want to console.log console.error. I want that error to be error in get and then display the error. Okay. Then we return worst case scenario. We want our next response to be the JSON. So error equals to internal server error. All right. And for this, we are going to give it status of 500. Okay. Are we together? All right. Okay. So all right. Enoch, you just disappeared and got and came back. Are you following us? Huh? No response from you. Enoch, are you following? All right, so with this, we can now go back to our user slice, and then we can now change our API call. Utilizing our Anxious instance, we can now do this. Are we good? So this is the route we're now using to get our users based on their ID, right? So if we come here, ideally, if we click on UDO, Anxious is not defined. Why is it not defined? Okay. That's not allowed. That's nice. Okay. Anxious instance. Okay. So we're getting the method not allowed error. Let's fix that. Okay. Okay. All right. So we did not have this here, which is why we're experiencing that error, right? So I believe we should be good now. Request failed the status code of 405. Still method not allowed. Okay, so let's go to that page and comment out the code we are not expecting. We are not expecting to have this. We're not expecting to have a company. What we're expecting is email and name. And how are we expecting the name? We're expecting it as just name, I believe. Yeah, okay. So with that, let's go ahead and try again. We still have this. Okay, I think I know where the error is coming from. So page. Okay. Okay. Let's use it. Okay. All right. All right. Let's see. Let's finish. Hello, guys. I'm here. Let's figure this out. Okay, let's check the routes again. So for this route, we have aware spotting, yes. Get request, yes. Your user ID. You did not use this user ID. Okay. So that was so much. Let's figure out why we're having this error. What's going on? Mm-hmm. Hold on. Mhm. Getting the idea. Getting correct ID. Method not allowed. That's strange. Why is the method not allowed? To get request. Okay, that's it. Okay. And also, so Okay. It seems like code that's working does not want to work anymore. Same. Storage. Okay, when is already used? Okay. Um, okay. Okay, all right. We've been able to solve it. So we're using next request instead of next response here to return our our 200. Can you hear me? Yeah, so we're using next request here instead of next response. I just saw it now. Yeah. Okay, let's move. So we have our name showing now, right? So let's test out others. So we can say we click on this, we should have enough. If you come here and click on Udo, we should have Udo, right? Are we good? Are we good, guys? All right, so take note of what happened here. This is supposed to be next response, not next request, right? So take note of it. I like the fact that we're able to solve it here in class so that you guys can sit and see that when you have a problem, you don't run away from it. You have to sit and make sure that it's resolved before you move on. Okay? All right, let's keep going. Now that we have this created, we have already seen this in action. We can now dynamically view our user details, right? Now let's assume we want to create new users, right? We can now come to, if you look at it here, we've already created a route for post request if we want for creation of new users, right? So all we need to do is utilize this post request, and then we can go ahead and create a new user. So let's do that. So we come to our user slice. We can now say for this we want to create user. Create user and then create user action. And we want to pass using the same route. As you can see, this create user is inside this route too. So the same slash user that we use to access this get request is the same slash user that we will use to access the post request, right? So we are going to use slash user, and this time we are going to be passing some data as our payload. So we say new user, right? Are we good? And for this, we're going to say new user. Okay. All right, so we have this initiated. We have our API call is a post request. So this is what differentiates this one and this one. So as far as we are using a post request now, it is going to recognize the post request here. Are you following? It's going to recognize this post request. And when we use get method, it's going to recognize this get request. This gets route rather. All right, so for this, we are posting to this same user's route, right? And then we want to create our extra reducer and say create user extra reducer, and we can now attach it in this one. Okay. All right. So for this, for success now, we're not going to pass it. We're going to say user dot users dot push. So what we are doing, we are passing the new results from this API request now, and we are adding it to the user array. Okay, so that we can now visualize it as a new user. Are we together? All right. So let's go ahead and utilize this in our code, right? So if we come back to page, our entry point page, right? We'll come back to our entry point page. We can now create our form. So for creation of that form, let's just const and use form data sets form data just to use email. Yeah. Unmute yourself, Udo. Let me hear your question properly.
Hello, sir. I'm not sure I saw clearly, but where you were creating the users and even when you were fetching them, you fetched it 3 times. Fine, there are 3 users. So, and then when you were creating, you now created 3 exactly in that place.
Were you not in
So,
class, Redux?
no, I didn't. I was not in class. That was the period when
Not watched
I
the
was
class.
having this issue.
Okay. And you've not watched the class.
Mm.
That's why you have it.
No, I'm not.
So it's going to be bringing us backwards.
Okay, no wahala. No,
I'll make an exception.
when I watch, I'll be able to understand. I just needed to.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I'll make an exception for you because I understand your situation, right? Good. So
Okay.
what's happening here is these are called extra reducers, right? And for these extra reducers, we are just using this to handle the different states of our asynchronous API request. If you notice, you see that on this line of this code, you see that we have our API call, create user, and then we have a pending state. So this handles the API call when the API is not successful. So we can now define the status of our API call as loading.
Oh, okay,
Now,
I understand.
in this case, we have now fulfilled, our API call has now been fulfilled.
Fulfilled. So it's saying succeeded.
Now successful. So we can now check
Yeah.
the status and define the state, give the status successful. And then for this particular process, we want to now push the content of the results, like the
For the
response
API
result.
call.
Good. We want to now push that response result into this already existing users array and update the state of this users array.
Okay.
Then on failed scenario, we want to change the status to failed, and then we want to update our error.
Post an error. Okay.
And so we are not making three API calls. It's one API call, but we are handling all the different states of that API call.
I get it. Thank you.
You're welcome. You can mute now. Okay, so back to what we. Okay, so it's okay to use states, manage the state of little things. Of course, yes, definitely. Of course, definitely. But if your form, like in a scenario where you have like multi-page forms now, those are like complex scenarios. Definitely, you want to utilize like maybe context. You want to use context to handle those kind of forms, or maybe you want to use Redux. Yeah. Enough, does that answer your question? Enoch. Okay. All right. So let's go back to, we were working on our page, right? Okay. So, okay. So we have our form, our form state defined, right? So we can go ahead and now create our handler. So let's say const handle input change, right? And say event arrow function const name value was to eat dot target. Okay. So we want to set form data to be form data. Okay. So pardon me, we will not be validating our form in this class, but feel free to validate your form when practicing this, okay? Or rather, make sure you are validating your form when practicing this. So handle submits. So and document I want to try and catch const was to await dispatch. And for dispatch, you want to dispatch create user, right? And for this create user, we want to utilize form data for the API call. I want to add an alert and say user created successful. Okay. And it's ideal that we clear our form. Okay. Then at the end of everything, we want to fetch our users again. Okay, let's catch our error. Right, so console gets error was to error creating user. I want to alert. So make the create user, please try it. Okay, that works. All right, so we have our handle submit, right? And we have our handle input change. So we can go ahead and create our form. Let's create our form here. Okay. So let's give it div first. Class name, say my8, and close that div, and then create our form. Right. For submit, we need to pass on Windows submit function. Where in the yeah, okay, so let's have a label. And for a label, let's give it a class name. Text will be 700. Though can close it and call it name. Then input type should be text. Text. Name should be name. And then value and then on the type of name. Okay, and we have our on change. And for change, we want to use our handle input change. Okay. And let's give it a little class, little style. Let's say MC1. And okay. Okay. And let's border, border, 300. And let's, okay. All right, so you have this. Let's put it in a div. Okay, and for this we have email. Email. All right. All right. Okay, are we good? Are we together? Oh, thank you. All right. Let's see what our form looks like. Okay. And we have our form. Let's add our submit button. But last name will be explore UI to PG. All right. So we have our form done. We can now go ahead and visualize. Okay, so now that we have our form created, we can now test out to see our if everything works fine, right? So let's see episode.load. Form data. So you see that form data initially is empty. So if I put in gray here and put in an email, so that form data is now, we now have some content in form data. So if we click on create, the user created successfully. So if I click OK, you see that gray has been added to our users, and the initial user has been cleared. Are we good? All right. So yeah, that's going to be where we're going to end our class today. I hope you guys were able to learn something new today and you understood everything we've done here. So go ahead and practice it. Watch the video again. Practice what we've done. We just We just created a full stack application where we have our back end and our front end in one place. I'm sure that should be exciting. So go ahead and explore it. And give me feedback in my DMs on Discord, on the general chats. Give your feedbacks there. Let's hear your experience when you practice it. Let's know where you've yeah yeah Daniel, exactly. So let's know your experience when you practice it, and then we can all share from your knowledge. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. For those that came late, okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. See you guys in our next class. Bye.